let's go ahead and get started. So hello, everyone. Yes, he's coming in virtually today. So my name is Ern Bodvarson. I'm Dean of the Atkinson Graduate School of Management, and it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you to our Portland Center. For those of you not familiar with the center, this is where we offer our MBA for Professionals program, which is our part-time MBA program to our Portland cohort. You probably noticed the name Data Science. When you walked in, we share this facility with our School of Computing and Information Science at Willamette, which is a brand new school. And up here, they offer the MS in Data Science. And we partner with them in offering a joint MBA, MS in Data Science, a joint offering that we're very excited about. So I'm delighted that you're here for our second panel of the Atkinson Discussions for Our Time panel series. This is a new series that I have started with the purpose of expanding our school's work as a thought leader in the community and to give our students exceptional opportunities to learn critical and timely issues in the management world. And one of those issues is corporate social responsibility. And we want to give members of the community an opportunity to come in and listen and learn and share their own ideas about critical issues of the day. So while students are the center of what we do in Atkinson, we take our role very seriously in Atkinson as a window between the university and the community. And that's really partly what this panel series is all about. So today's discussion is titled Revisiting the Business Roundtable's 2019 Revised Statement on the Purpose of a Corporation, Are Stakeholders Truly Valued by Corporations? The event is being recorded, and an archive recording will be available shortly after the event concludes. We will email the recording out to all those who RSVP'd. We also make it available on our school's website and in other ways. We have four distinguished panelists. It's my pleasure to introduce them. This gentleman here is Dr. Jake Hoskins. He is the guy at Atkinson, Associate Professor of Marketing and Data Science in the Atkinson School. On the screen is Dr. Elliot Maltz. He is the former Guy F. Atkinson Professor of Marketing, or to be more precise, the Guy F. Atkinson Professor of Marketing Emeritus at Willamette University, was a colleague in the Atkinson School for many years. And Elliot, I know you had car trouble today, so thank goodness for the wizardry of modern technology. You can join us this way. It's great. It's great to see you. Jasmine Ames is Vice President, Relationship Manager at US Bancorp. And then Kelly McCann is Senior Manager for Product and Innovation at Stumptown Roasters. Did I get your title correct? Because I know titles change. You are still, that is the name of your role still. Very good. Very happy to have you. So at this time, I'm going to turn things over to Jake so we can get this panel discussion started. Take it away, please.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for coming. It's a really nice opportunity to have this discussion. It's something that's important to a lot of people, important to kind of where business is heading today. And really the way that we have this framed and kicked off is kind of centered around this statement that came from the Business Roundtable in 2019. For those of you who do not know who the Business Roundtable are, they're a big collection of CEOs of major corporations in the United States that basically have been getting together for decades and kind of said like, okay, what is business about? What should it be about? What should it do? And it was a pretty landmark change in 2019 where they shifted from really a shareholder view, which says, hey, our job as a corporation drive shareholder value alone. Say no, it is about stakeholder, which meant other interests should be considered to some degree. And from a timing perspective, 2019, what's happened since then? A whole lot of things, right? So I think it's a really good opportunity for us to have a sort of reflect and discuss upon this. Before we jump in, I want to get some more detail from our panelists on their background and what they've put inside of this topic. They take the time out of their schedule, but I do want to give a quick shout out to my class and teaching a class on this. It's a new elective. And I have 6 students who are very interested in the topic: Ashley Collins, Jill Barada, Kendra Knapp, Brianna Majors, Carson Rittner, and Jet Star, who all collaborated to put together this. With that, practitioners, let's start here. Elliot, you can go last. We'll come back to you. We'll throw the tech practitioners one by one. If you don't mind, tell us a little bit more about yourself. How did you get into the industry? How did you get into your role? And what gets you excited about this topic?
So really. Another deep one. So like, yeah, all right. I can start, sure. So I guess I have moved through various roles in the food and beverage industry, but really kind of the root of my interest in CSR came fairly early in my career. I was working in a sales role and went into grocery retailers to sell in new coffee items. And I had someone look at me and say, why do I need organic? It's just a scam. And it really, in my young idealistic mind, really hit me hard that someone believed that there was this third-party certification that wasn't real and that, it was all about just making more money. It was a long circuitous route for me to actually end up in a role that was more focused in sustainability, my day-to-day work. But definitely that was the kind of the spark that got me going. And today I work in the coffee industry in a product and innovation role. And I think it's funny because it's not maybe evident that I work a lot on the corporate sustainability space, but innovation has become sustainability. And so that's where I am today. I feel like I did not answer all the questions. So we'll start there.
Great. I will say thank you for kind of found me. I definitely didn't go through a lot of academia. I actually started out in neuroscience and was like looking for a way to finance my dog park tickets and like I'll take this part-time teller position. And here I am 15 years later. I've always been really mission driven. My journey in academia always centered around healthcare, holistic healthcare, specifically looking at anthropology and global health. I did a little pivot after undergrad and Willamette also found me. I keep getting found in my lovely career journey. And through a lot of career development, a lot of mentorship, started looking at roles where I had this passion for being very mission driven, holistic. And essentially right upon my graduation from Willamette, I found this role. We've been rebranded, but at the Community Development Corporation level of US Bank, where it looked like there were some finance roles where we were mission driven, really trying to serve as community partners and uphold the big CRA policy. So found myself kind of pivoting into that realm and I've stayed there ever since. So again, I don't know if I've answered all of your questions, but a lot of finding and curating.
Yeah, perfect. And Elliot, if you don't mind giving some background on your research interests, your academic interests that kind of led you through your career. And maybe more broadly, why do you think scholars and practitioners should really sort of take notice and care about the topic we're talking about today?
So thanks, Jake. I guess what I would say is I took on this. So I'm a marketing PhD, marketing professor by training, which would not typically lead one to believe that I would be interested in CSR or anything remotely like CSR. But about 15 years ago, yeah, I guess it was about 15 years ago, I was pretty frustrated by how shareholder value was really being defined by the broader business community. It seemed like it was being defined by next quarter's results. Did I make or beat next quarter's results? And if I did, then my share price went up in the short term. And if I didn't, my share price went down in the short term. And I started looking at longer term value add from corporations. And what I found was that, and I'll show you some stuff a little later, that corporations which really considered more broadly, they still consider shareholders, but they considered shareholders long-term value as opposed to shareholders short-term value, which implied that they had to consider other stakeholders besides shareholders to really build a brand and build a long-term strategic advantage. And I started doing research on that, and in my opinion, my research is right. But that's a typical academic talking, but I'll show you some things a little later that might support that. So I've been working on this for 15 years. I actually taught classes on this topic for about the last 8 years before I went emeritus. I still do research in that area.
Yeah, thank you. So some good background there. And I would add on also marketing PhD as well. And adding on Elliot's comments, one of the things that sticks out to me having a background in marketing is exactly what you talked about, that trade-off between short run and long run. I think that's one thing I see when I think about different functional areas that a marketer has this sort of long run view, like you're thinking about managing brand image, you're managing brand reputation, you're managing customer relationships over the long term. And I think that's something that translates to this topic successfully, right? Like I'm managing interests of stakeholders, I'm managing value with customers, employees, and suppliers. So we all work together in some successful way. It seems like there's a lot there that can be almost synergistic with even trying to drive shareholder value as well. So I don't know how much the visual impact that was go on today, which does kind of lead us into the next question. Then I'll open this to the floor. And this is for the panelists, but along the way, I'd imagine that the group is going to have thoughts and comments of your own. So jot those down. We're going to open up some Q&A at the end and to make sure we have a chance to go back and forth. So for the panelists, we can't ignore the fact that at the end of the day, quarterly results matter. You're at a for-profit organization, if you get judged on this, it comes back. So if you like this belief that you should be looking over the long term, and you should manage stakeholder interests, you should maybe look at something other than profits. How do you balance that successfully? And how is it prioritized? It's a real broad question, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I'm happy to jump in there. I think, as I mentioned, have worked in the food and beverage industry, and I think within that industry, we're working within this very broad supply chain, but we're working all the way down to producers who are, really influenced by the way that the world is changing, the environment is changing. And so, I think we can't ignore that. And I think if we try to, continue on the path that we've always been on, and that doesn't work out for everybody throughout the supply chain, there is no longevity with business. So I think it's, inevitable in some ways. But it does take some true intention and strategy to really build something for the longer term and really be agile too along the way and find ways to continue to evolve as the world changes.
I definitely echo those sentiments, and a lot of it is about being intentional and doing your strategic engagement with your stakeholders initially right away. And to use a little bit of marketing, it's really getting that buy-in. There's no longevity if you're not getting that initial buy-in. And so one thing I've noticed in my role is every year we do use the influence of quarterly results, but then we do develop pillars within different business lines. And so we'll try to take that intentional approach based on our pillars. So, okay, what's going on in the West if there's a huge housing crisis? Like, how can we be a better partner? What do those stakeholders look like? Is it all nonprofits? Is it for-profit developers? And who and what business line needs to go out and, gain those relationships? And what does that look like? And how does that report back to those pillars that we established?
Great. The follow-up questions on these two before we turn to Elliot. Talking about housing and you do a lot of like affordable housing, right?
Yeah.
And think about affordable housing, thinking about innovation, and being sustainable and how you innovate. With both of those capacities, I could imagine you could have a few different approaches. Like one approach could be like, we have to provide affordable housing as an imperative, and how do we generate a return around that? Or there could be, we want to provide affordable housing to some level, and we want to provide a return, and how do we balance this? And you think the same thing, sustainability. So I'd be interested to hear, like, keep that out further, like, how do you balance that, the potential competition between interests? And am I wrong in assuming it's that competition, or can they be synergistic?
I think a lot of it is synergistic, and it's being intentional about how holistic you are. So I would say, I only do affordable housing in California. My role is very specific on treasury and investments, and trying to help clients get their best rate of return for those types of, we have a lot of reserves sitting. What does that look like? How do those funds flow back into the organization? And so that's my strategy. I work with a group of other relationship managers as well. So some people are really looking to optimize credit usage and their strategy around that. And a lot of our roles are curated out of policies. Since we're upholding the bank CRA policy, we also have to work with the broader bank and government banking. And so it does take a lot of coordination, but I would say a lot of it is synergistic, because I will say, okay, this is an investment scenario, like what can you do from the foundation side to help fund this organization, because they have meaningful impact in the community that they're in. We need to help them from a foundation's perspective as well. Okay, what can you do on the tax credit side? What can I do from the rate of return side? So we all kind of work together, and I like to look at those numbers holistically. So when we work with a client that may be a nonprofit, affordable housing developer, and property manager, how are we holistically partnering with them as a
And it's interesting, because I would say it's very similar, when you look at the food and beverage, I think, when we talk about the coffee industry, it's very much the same, that we kind of have this core, business that does really drive the bulk of what we do. But as we look towards innovation, we look towards new products, we look towards new growing methods, new producer partners. It's really about finding, what works synergistically with what we already have within our portfolio. And then, I think both of those together help to, fund the ongoing innovation and growth of the company. And really, on the marketing side, help to drive awareness and drive growth overall.
Elliot, you have patient.
Well, the only thing I would add is, and again, I'm not out there in the real world much. Haven't been for a really long time. But when I talk to people in my research, one of the things that they tell me is that the real hard part, if they're in an organization that has traditionally been short-term driven, is to get their colleagues to buy into the vision of not being so short-term vision. And in the innovation side in particular, articulating very clearly how the innovation both has benefits for the organization and for the broader community. And while those benefits for both sides are going to be longer term, if you can get them to buy into the vision, it's going to be a lot easier task to get both sides the value add they're really trying for.
Yeah, I think agree, disagree about that. Okay, let's go to the next one then. Let's jump over and think about, when you talk about whether the interests could be competing or synergistic, but let's imagine that there has to be some scenarios where, let's say, one that we've talked a lot about in my class so far is sometimes employees and customers may have interests, right? And one of the things that we were actually just talking about last night was I create some point of sale system in retail, and I could create it in a way that's really easy for employees to use, sort of employee centric, or I could create it in a way that's really simple for customers, and customer centric. And sometimes we find that those are, hopefully they're considered, but there could be some complicated elements. Have you come across any specific situations, and do you have any go-to, like, would I prioritize one stakeholder over another, or does it depend on circumstance, or how do I do this? I have so many different interests to care about.
That might be an industry specific question, and I'll say that because for me, I find myself on the client advocacy side a lot, and so I do fight a lot of those internal battles because I feel like at the end of the day, there's so many competitors in the market that anyone can go anywhere to get what they need. So what really differentiates you as a corporation is being customer centric. I mean, I feel like customers are kind of take a hierarchical, they take the first priority in that stakeholder analysis. And so you really do want to make it, I feel like, make things easier on a client. So I have seen where some systems are developed and it's really, really hard for a client to use, but really easy for us to use. And I'm always like, let's rethink this or create some type of exception process, because that will push your key stakeholder out. And if we don't have our clients, we don't exist. So.
What you're saying there is, I can feel Elliot's presence behind me.
I feel it too.
That really supports your broader perspective as well, Elliot, right, in terms of customer satisfaction first.
Well, but that's not that's not really, in my mind, that's not really a conflict, right? If you don't satisfy customers, you don't generate revenue.
Yeah.
I mean, it's as simple as that. So I think that part has always been fairly well understood, even though it's not always practiced. The whole notion of a market orientation has been in the business community for 30 years. So I don't think that's, but particularly, that's not the big hurdle. The big hurdle is when you're going to do something for the community that, at least in the short term, is going to hurt revenue. That's when you really have to kind of figure out how to manage that.
I think that's something that I see a lot as we work towards new product development and trying to be innovative in the space. We often find that innovation can be a little more expensive than the inputs, the ingredients, whatever it is, pieces of the puzzle can be a little more costly. And so I think there's definitely part of overall the approach is really building the strategy and the understanding across the organization that those products are probably going to be a lower margin when they are, first come to market, and the expectation cannot be the same across the entire portfolio when you're talking with leadership and looking kind of at that broader strategy.
Yeah, and I have a very selfish question. We're actually conducting some research right now in consumer packaged goods on organic products, and one of the things that we're looking at in an empirical study is whether or not private label brands can have success in marketing organic products. Because it's an interesting question to us, because private label brands are typically seen by consumers as the cheaper options, value options. And typically consumers see organic products at premium or higher price and so on. And so, but it's a fascinating question too, from a consumer welfare perspective, because if private label brands can get organic products successfully to consumers, you'd imagine that means more people buy organic and expand the market. So I'd be interested to hear from your experience, the challenges and opportunities there, and can organic become a larger segment of the market, and if so, how?
I'd say the short answer is no, organic cannot become a larger segment of the market. And honestly, I think that's rooted in the agricultural piece, that less than 1% of our farmland is organic today. And so the idea that we would, be able to grow the market requires that initial input to be much larger. And at this point, in my experience, I don't think I've seen the systems in place to really evolve and change that quickly. I would love to believe that that's the future thing, but to be realistic, I don't think that it is today or in the very near future.
Super interesting. So you can be as much as you want from a brand management perspective. There's a whole bunch of upstream supply chain things, policy things that you believe would require restructuring.
Absolutely. But you know, I think what I have seen, especially in the coffee industry, is we're getting a little more creative and we're approaching things a little bit differently. So we're not just looking at third-party certifications. Sometimes who I work for, full disclosure, but you know, we developed 20 years ago our direct trade program, and it has a lot of the same tenets as an organic certification. It is not, and we understand that and acknowledge that, but there are other ways, I think, to manage through supply chain to get to the same kind of end result in many ways. So I think that's the other piece of it, is we have to be careful about leaning too much on these already established certifications. I think there's a lot that we don't know and we haven't explored yet.
Yeah, so just as an example of a company that's trying to expand out that input pool for organics, General Mills has been spending a lot of time and a lot of money on trying to organize entire supply chains. Not necessarily, I'm not sure if it's organic, but certainly more different agricultural processes that they see as more long-term, consistent with climate change problems. And when I went and looked at how much they're spending a lot, and they're not getting any return yet, but that's an example of, you know, exactly what I talked about, that you really have to have a company with a top-down sort of orientation to spend that kind of money.
Yeah, that's a great example, Elliot. I think it's one that we talk a lot about amongst my peers, because they are spending a ton of money and the return isn't there yet. But the idea that they are spending the money, they are committed to it, and you know, they're helping to tell the story, because some of us smaller brands don't have those kinds of budgets. So it is, you know, I see it as a positive, even if it necessarily, you know, doesn't net the end result that all of us anticipate.
I think there's different ways to monetize the desired end result, right? We could put out a huge fiscal number out there, and we've got a lot of commitments out there as well, and some of us internally, okay, we're gonna make the revenues back for these commitments. But when you look at the longevity and the impact from a brand management perspective, okay, we've done this commitment. When people think about things that have made a difference in the community, they're gonna look at US Bank. We're present, we're there, we have a huge consumer based market share, not just on a corporate commercial bank side. We make sure our name's out there, we make sure we're a trusted partner. So some of those intangibles that you can't quantify right away do show some returns. And I know that calculation can get complicated, but I think that there is some longevity in, you know, taking the risk on it, spending so much initially.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? That a lot of the potential financial returns are in.
Yeah, and that's probably the biggest challenge, right? Is
Yeah.
to find some way to prove that value, not necessarily monetary.
Classic problem.
Right.
Customer loyalty, how do we monetize loyalty?
Good. So that actually segues really nicely into the next question, which is that a complaint that is sometimes wrong is that organizational actions that appear to prioritize social or environmental commitments are not necessarily altruistic. They're not really ethically driven, or rather the company really thinks they should do this, but they're just trying to manage that reputation. So a few questions on this. If I'm an outside audience, if I'm a consumer, how am I supposed to make judgments as to whether an organization is being authentic in its commitments or not? Maybe we'll start there.
I mean, I think the question is, can you ever really know? You know, I don't think you can. What I appreciate that I'm seeing more in the industry is these publicly stated goals, and you know, have CEOs having to come to Wall Street and acknowledge, like, we didn't meet this ESG goal, we didn't meet the CSR goal, because I think those are the kinds of conversations that really help to drive change. in a lot of those organizations, but, I'm not sure we'd ever know for sure if it's all altruistic.
Authenticity is a hard one, but I echo those sentiments, and I think it does take leadership, senior leadership, to show presence in some of that. So one of the things I commend our CEO on is a lot of times I'll go to like a regional equity summit and our CEO is there. And whether he's speaking on the panel or directly engaging with our clients, he makes it a point to be there. And so I think that there are some indicators of authenticity at the end of the day, because you're taking someone in senior leadership to really show up and roll up their sleeves and do the work and take, you know, the criticism of saying, okay, you guys made this commitment, where is it? Or, you know, we see these numbers, but where are those affordable housing units? I don't see them in the Walnut Creek area. I see them in Los Angeles. And so hearing that feedback and then having us come back and implement that is, I think, that kind of synergistic aspect of like showing up and making the impact that way.
Yes, that's a really good response. It's a really good comment. And the follow-up question is, and maybe it's just an affirmation. I would assume that there's some sort of feeling within the organization among employees, whether or not like what we're saying is really what we need. Any commentary on that in terms of, if you're an organization, how do you gauge sort of the employee morale and employee feelings around this? And how do you sort of react to that?
There's a lot of components there. I mean, we could go down the KPI avenue, we can go down the performance measured avenue. You can also talk about, one thing I really like that we do are like the 2 down. So we'll have, you know, someone that's like 2 levels up, work with people 2 levels down to kind of talk about, okay, we created these pillars. What does that look like for you? You know, and a lot of people go, oh yeah, like I'm just an analyst, or I just work in account payables. And how does this impact your affordable housing deal? And then when we start talking big picture, we go, well, if you don't manage the flow of funds, that deal doesn't happen, right? Those wires don't get out. And then it gives people that, oh yeah, the work I do matters. It translates up to this bigger mission goal. And I think that kind of builds that relationship of, oh, the work I'm doing is meaningful, even though it seems so far removed. So tying those KPIs or tying the work that people do to the bigger mission, I would say.
A lot of sense. I think also, you know, having the opportunity for open communication, working in an organization, you know, we go all the way down to baristas who report into the same organization that I do. And so we all have different ideas about what could happen and should happen in this space. And so I think having, we do have some open forums and have some open conversations about new ideas and how to implement them and what that would mean for the organization. And also what do we see our competitors doing and how do we continue to be competitive, but do it in a way that's still authentic to who we are.
I don't have anything specific because obviously I'm not out there. But what Jasmine said really resonates with what our literature says, and that is it's a lot easier to do that if you really do tie everything to your mission, and your mission isn't immediate next quarter value. It really is more of a cultural thing at some point, and like many of these things, as both of the other panelists have talked about, they're very intangible and they're really hard to measure. And if you're not wedded to this stuff, it doesn't matter how you do it, the measures are going to look squishy. And you just have to have a culture that people believe that what you're saying is what you're doing.
And I appreciate you bringing in kind of the academic perspective, kind of lining it up with practitioner perspective. I think that's one thing that practitioners are always saying we don't always talk to one another and academic. We're at about 40 minutes. We have maybe one last question, and it's a broad one, and maybe this would be kind of a wild card question. You know, there's some really specific topics that you could maybe do a whole discussion on here. And when we started questions, we're like, guys, you can go get a bunch of depth on sustainability, got a bunch of depth on DEI, and so on. And so I guess I would just open the floor for each panelist to just say, what's the biggest topic within this broad realm that you're passionate about, or you think that is emerging, or anything you're seeing out there, kind of give you a soapbox and talk about something specific. We'll let Elliot go first this time.
Yeah, actually, this would probably be a good time for me to
Yeah.
sort of make my pitch on what I've been doing for the past 15 years. I think this whole notion, I've always thought this whole notion of that for really long-term successful corporations, there's a trade-off between thinking about broader stakeholders and long-term profitability or strategic advantage. And I'm just going to bring this up. And so I don't know how many of you are familiar with Just Capital, but it was an organization that was put together to really discuss this thing. And what's interesting about it, it was really an organization whose founder is a hedge fund manager. And so let me just show you the top 10 Just Capital companies. Sorry, Jasmine, Bank of America is number one.
I know, I saw that.
But look yeah, if you look at the longevity and if you just want to look at stock price, you might want to consider NVIDIA this year, Microsoft this year. You know, these are all Apple. These are all really companies that are built for the long term. And they all are ranked really high. And one of the things that Just Capital really looks at more than I typically look at things is employees, how they treat their employees. And that's what I just want to leave you with. There is, in my view, there is no conflict between long-term value add for the corporation and long-term value add for the community.
I'm like, now I want to look at their criteria for the scorecard. If I could put myself in a soapbox, and selfishly enough, my research is on social justice, I would say social justice. I think we're in a political and social environment right now where a lot of people want to be heard and they want to feel valued. And so I think a lot of corporations are finding themselves, and we've already seen a lot of that, where they really need to pivot in the way that they serve different communities, different people, and how people interact with the organization at every level. So again, at the employee level, at the consumer level, at the commercial level, in the communities, is your organization volunteering? I love that banking is upheld by the CRA, but that metric does not exist for banks who don't have a consumer leg. So I actually just met with the CSRB and CA, and they're not upheld to that in the Oregon market because they have no consumer base. So what does that look like for financial institutions like that? And so I think my soapbox is really just how can you really quantify the impact you're making? And let's, look at those measures again and really make sure that, the areas that we have a physical or any type of impactful presence, are we really zooming in, even if that's using census data to see, what are the demographics of my consumers and of my stakeholders, and what are the needs? And let's really do a needs assessment. And even if that has to be at a local, regional zip code, it doesn't matter how much you want to flesh that out. Like I would really like to see, and I know a lot of people are going to have to do that from a competition standpoint, what does that look like, and how is that implemented with these large organizations as well?
I think, for me, the soapbox is really just kind of thinking about things more holistically when it comes to consumer packaged goods. And I've spent the last year or so working on a packaging project. And so not just thinking about what we're putting in the package, but the actual physical package. And there's a lot that's changing very quickly in terms of state and national and regulations. And companies are reacting or trying to react and trying to understand how we can change. But it's a very important issue to me because I think it's something we often overlook when we walk through the grocery store, everything is in a package. A lot of those packages are not well made or sometimes overly engineered and not great for the environment. So there's a huge opportunity out there, and I think I encourage you to pay attention to what's changing in terms of the overarching regulations, because there's a lot that I think we're all going to learn in the next few years.
Good. And I'll add one really simple one, is something that I've observed broadly is that sometimes we talk about marketing and the marketing problem where, you know, marketing has made itself into the kind of an evil empire in some eyes. And I think business in general has this issue as well, right? Especially that I teach younger MBA students, and it's not that uncommon for younger MBA students to come into class and sort of think that they're learning a practice that could be bad in the world. And it doesn't have to, right? And generally speaking, when you ask people what do they do and why do they do it, most people are doing something because they want to make some positive impact. Most people want to buy from organizations that are doing things positively. And so when you sort of unpackage that, you say all these stakeholders that we're talking about, whether they're consumers, employees, leaders, have a shared interest in something more than profit. So there has to be something there that's meaningful. Big takeaway, right? So I think that's just leftover stain from such a drive forward of shareholders only for a long period of time, right? There's my interpretation of it. Thank you. Great panel, guys. Really good. Do some Q&A. I've got 10 minutes.
Okay, I can start. Hi, I'm Andy Dousman. I am a strategic product planner in Intel's Ethernet division, actually. So I was very excited to see Intel actually up on that list. That was kind of neat. I have a couple, but one of the big ones that I'm kind of curious the most about is how we balance what many might see as a conflict of interest between the products that we make and the ESG or ROI, right? Things that we're held accountable to. So for example, we talked about affordable housing, which as definition doesn't generate the same ROI by definition, right? As a new development in Walnut Creek, which is where near my grandparents grew up. And so how do we, my question is, how do we drive and what are the ethics of these products when we are basically going in and advocating in our organizations for products that will inherently make less margin and return less to the company in that regard?
That's a great question. I would say, I wish there was a more eloquent way of answering this, but I would really almost bifurcate it, right? So one thing that I love about being on impact finance is that I'm not on CRE. Don't echo what I said, but like our CRE RMs, they do have to go and work with those for-profit developers. I think US makes done a really good job of differentiating those. So we do have other products that have a higher rate of return, but I look for a certain criteria of clients that I only house. I do not touch the for-profit developers. I only work with affordable housing, and that way I can offer my specialized pricing that's mission driven and aligned with our business lines goals, where like someone else in Walnut Creek can go in and say, well, our rates for this product are different because this is an affordable housing project. So we've really done a good job of completely separating that out and saying, okay, we've done a tax credit deal, like their deposit person works in impact finance, their treasury management person works in impact finance, even their commercial customer service person is rolling up to that business line so that we don't kind of muddy the waters a little bit and say, okay, now your rate's something crazy, because we believe in the mission of affordable housing and we understand our customer segment really well. So we know that we can't upcharge or do it differently. So I think it takes a lot of that though. There's a lot of coordination because it's like, you want to be a one bank, right? We want to be a holistic bank and we want to serve our client holistically. So we really do have to tease out internally, like, no, this is your pricing structure. This is what you're able to offer within your product realm. This other side of the house does this differently.
to almost establish two separate product lines, two separate swim streams.
Yeah, exactly. And it's hard from a regulatory perspective, but again, we have our own regulatory people that are like, no, this is tax credit finance. We're not touching what this community side of the house is doing or what this commercial side of the house is doing.
Thank you.
So Jasmine, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So you're on the less profit side of the business.
She doesn't think about it that way.
I don't think about it that way, Elliot. I have my.
Okay, well, let me ask the question so you can maybe not think about it that way even a little bit more. Have you ever seen an opportunity where the more high margin part of the business can use some of your efforts in terms of dealing with either regulators or civic leaders or whatever?
I have, and I actually do a lot of this internal debating. I did it this morning before I came here. I feel like at the end of the day, we have to draw a line. So I do have a couple of clients in my portfolio that do mixed market rate affordable housing. So half is affordable, the other half is market rate. For a consistency perspective, I think that my rule of thumb is if the client touches affordable housing, they need to stay in affordable housing. I get it, but at the end of the day, that's probably what brought the client to us. And so even if there is a little bit of a mixed portfolio standpoint, it doesn't make sense for another RM to come in and offer a client double the price. Essentially, I'm like, how does that look from even a brand management perspective? How can I explain why Joe over here is charging double and I charge less, right? And so there is some weighted, I do work internally quite a bit because some people say, well, Jasmine, that's lost revenue, but that's where I have to plead the case of, look, like we're in the business of affordable housing. This is what my business line does. We are really in the market. These clients may bring their residents to us and you're going to make the revenue back on the consumer side. So it's really about me building the case for that. But yes, I am on the less profitable side. But I guess my trade-off is CRA metrics, right? Like the bank needs to perform from a CRA perspective. So I do kind of get final say with that leverage as well. New policy.
Other questions?
Yeah, hey Jake, I have a question. Kennedy Hawkins, Willamette MBA, Executive Development Center. So thank you, Jake, for you and your panelists here. So I have a question. So if this is, so the change happened in the Business Roundtable's position in 2019. So I think to a lot of people, this is still kind of new territory. So how would you get, I mean, give me your elevator pitch. You're talking to a business leader, a CEO, C-level person, or business owner. Don, why should you care about this? How do you get this on your radar and getting your organization to make change?
Great question. I guess I can speak from experience in that, I don't know, 5-8 years ago, there was this understanding in the organization that I worked in that we are a sustainably minded brand. And so sustainability lives within each of us and we all bring it forward in our roles. We all bring it to new projects. And then I would say about, 4 years ago, there was a sudden realization that actually we don't always do that and that doesn't always happen. And so we need to be more intentional about the way that we're bringing this to life. And the best way to do that is to really create a role and to create KPIs, to create metrics that the entire organization is responsible for, but again, that they're stated, that they're clear, that we are all working towards a similar goal. That's how I've seen it come to life. I'm not sure that that's necessarily the right way to do it for every organization, but it has been effective.
Thanks.
Yeah, similar that way. And when I do the elevator pitch with, external business leaders, I do like to use metrics that we have. So we'll say, in the last 5 years, we've allocated $50 billion in funds to affordable housing projects as an LP in a lot of deals. And this has translated into 30,000 units. And so I try to talk into the impact just because we saw B of A's up there. I know the Chase and the Wells leaders in the market as well. We know each other. So I really just try to show differentiation, and I also just try to show alignment, like, hey, you've always banked with US Bank in this capacity. We offer this in this capacity. So why not keep that consistent? It's really hard going to another bank. And I try to talk about differentiation products as well. And that takes a lot of treasury management expertise, and I've worked in that realm as well. So I try to do that as well. A lot of the leaders I talk to are CFOs, a lot of accounting specialists, a lot of controllers. And so when I try to bring in things that we have from an innovative standpoint that makes processes easier for them, it helps open the conversation as well.
Yeah, that's good comments, and I think something that just a simple one for me is we all agree that business is about relationships, right? And then it's about relationships with your suppliers, with your customers, with your employees, and so on. So in some capacity, if you're not managing those in a way that's right, reciprocal, and that everyone's on board and with one another, you're likely to damage the relationships. I think that's the fundamental thing that you should work.
And the left hand, you should always know the right hand.
Yeah.
So I always tell everyone I'm very nosy internally, but I want to know who's closing a deal over here, who's opening cards over here, who's granting foundation funds over here, because we're all working with the same client. And so, or who's going to what events and who's going to what conferences, and it almost feels like a second job a lot of times, but I need that coordination, because that is what helps those relationships kind of grow. Like, oh yes, if Jasmine knows what is going on from all avenues of the bank, like I will always call her first.
It does strike me that the uptick of this is different industry by industry. And you work in development, affordable housing development industry, you hear about that. Is I know my father works in construction management, and when I tell him a little bit about this stuff, I get some blank stares from, because right in that industry, you are used to probably more less synergy, and you're used to more fighting over who's going to win this deal. And there's some industry norms there, so maybe that's another aspect, is it probably depends on who they are coming to. Elliot, do you have any other responses there?
I don't.
No? All right. Thank you. Maybe time for one more question?
So, competitive and or collaborative. So like when, I guess which idea will drive long-term success globally? I see a lot in my world of, it's like you want to be better than that other bank. You want to be better than that other company and say, hey, we're doing this cool thing. They're not with us. Or when is it that you call and say, let's do this together and like find a way through? And how do you balance those things?
Risk. I work for a conservative bank, so there are some deals where it's like, from a compliance and a risk analysis perspective, we're just not going to do. And it could be for a rich client, but the way the numbers come out, it's too risky for us. That's when we'll say, oh, and a lot of our deal closings, you'll see it'll be like US Bank, Chase, and Wells, and everyone has a different stake in it. And we'll go, okay, our risk assessment, we just can't, uphold to this level of commitment. Can you, and let's draw the agreement together. Let's get our legal counsels together and see how we can kind of manage risk that way and still get the job done, but maybe we aren't number one, or maybe we're not, maybe we're the perm lender, maybe we're not on the other side of the lending agreement. So that's really where that works for us.
And I think from my perspective, it's fairly collaborative in that there is an agreement that we all want to move the industry forward, that we want to find those synergies for all of us within the CSR space. I think what we've also discovered, especially when we talk about packaging, is that ultimately the majority of our competitors all purchase packaging from the same suppliers. So if we work collaboratively, when we really put the pressure on from all sides, it's hard for them to, deny or decline our interests. So there's benefit for sure collaboratively, but it is a balance too, obviously.
And anytime you're in a CSR innovation space, your biggest costs are up front. Your lowest profit margins are up front. And for instance, in the packaging business, if you can gain economies of scale, your costs are going way down real quickly. And fairly soon, what will likely happen is the packaging will be pretty comparable to the old packaging. So what you're trying to do here when you're dealing with a competitor is identify places of common interest. And often those places are about economies of scale. I mean, you know, that's the big game. If you can get the industry to change as a whole, and you were the start, and you have a bigger piece of the pie, you gain more than they gain, but everybody gains. And that's sort of that's how you get past that cost thing.
So I'm an economist, and I know that we are sometimes accused of having a Neanderthal view of the world when it comes to explaining something like corporate social responsibility. But, you know, Milton Friedman did say, gosh, 50 years ago, that there's only one stakeholder that matters, and it is the shareholder. Okay, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about a small proprietorship or ExxonMobil. The only stakeholder that matters is the party that has an equity stake in the enterprise. And so if Milton Friedman were here, I think he would argue that corporate social responsibility does not eschew the idea that only the shareholder matters. It's that if a company is exercising corporate social responsibility, they're recognizing that they have to properly compensate various kinds of inputs used in production that heretofore have not been compensated, that they're getting value from for free. So for example, environment and the community, those are inputs in production. You can't generate value from coffee without using the environment. You have to compensate the environment for the value added that comes from using that input. The same thing with the community. I mean, the community provides infrastructure, it provides public education systems. Those generate value to the company more sort of locally, and they have to be properly compensated. The same thing with the culture around us, the educational levels of the population. So if you take the position that, look, I'm using all these inputs, it's beyond labor, capital, and suppliers. I'm using these other sort of less tangible inputs. They're all generating value to me in production. And in a competitive market, they have to be compensated. There have to be factor payments. So really, when exercising CSR, giving back to the community or investing in the environment, yes, I am doing good, absolutely, but I'm properly compensating the factors of production. So, I mean, I don't know whether he'd admit this, but I think he would ultimately agree begrudgingly that CSR is still very consistent with this mono-stakeholder view. And the shareholders understand that. They understand that these other inputs need to be compensated. So just offering, hopefully not a Neanderthal perspective.
I think it's a really good point, because I think what it comes back to is, okay, even if your goal is shareholder criticism, you believe in that philosophy, you can't ignore the interests of stakeholders. They matter along the way, even if it just affects me.
Right, they're generating value, and that a competitive, if you're able to, the question is, can you measure the value, and can the value be properly apportioned back to the input? And the problem with pollution is that is an outcome of value, of liability not being accounted for, and value not being recognized to compensate back.
I hate to take on Milton Friedman. But I think what he would say is, it's not my corporation's job to do that, to assess what that compensation would be. It's up to the public sector and the regulators to assess that compensation. So while you're right, Warren, that should be happening if you go to a Milton Friedman perspective, and only a Milton Friedman perspective, it won't be happening.
although he wouldn't deny that these other inputs, as difficult as they are to measure, are generating value and would be compensated in a competitive market if we could measure the value generated and if we could enforce the compensation of those inputs. I don't think he'd deny that.
He would say he would deny that it's the corporation's responsibility to do any of that.
Okay, and that becomes I say ethical or perhaps political.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Given-
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's almost the concept too that I see, it's almost like, paying in to use the public right of way. With the natural resources and, the like, but, so I mean, that's just the way I'm kind of seeing it and likening it in my mind at this moment, but, you know, also to your point, Jasmine, about, you know, social justice and everything like that, you know, why is social justice so important? Similarly, in this instance, it's a demonstration of, you know, investing in something for the community, investing in, you know, and showing value for the rest of the world effectively, you know what I mean? So it's not only, it's not a tangible value, but it's more of a signaling to, you know, not only do I care about you socially, I care about you as an individual, the world, the public right of way in terms of that benefit there, you know, or that the buy-in from the corporation, let's say, that's making the investment. So it's yeah, an investment in community, it's an investment in the world, it's an investment in that public right of way, in a similar way.
Gosh, the sign of a good event is that it runs overtime. But we should wrap things up because I'm sure everybody's got other things to do today. So I want to thank the panelists for donating their time. Thank you, all four of you, for sharing expertise, and it was really cool to have some people from the private sector, and then to have some people from academia. So great stuff. So I want to thank all of you for coming and listening and sharing your ideas and thoughts. So we have two more of these panels this semester. The next panel will be on Thursday, March the 7th. And it's about artificial intelligence. And the title of the panel is simply Artificial Intelligence in Management. And the theme of the panel is a cross-section of people will talk about how AI is currently being used across different sectors and what things might look like in the long term with respect to how AI is used in different sectors. Tim Johnson, who is our Grace and Elmer Gowdy Associate Professor of Public Management and Data Science, is organizing the panel, but we're bringing in some people from industry. We also have some professors on the panel. It should be really good. Thursday, March the 7th, same place, same time, lunch available. And then we're also going to have a panel on April 9th on manufacturing.
Just 1 second, sorry.
On manufacturing, which is being organized by Charlie Hopewell, one of our alumni, and also on our Atkinson Leadership Council, retired CEO in manufacturing. There'll be proper advertising of both those panels. And again, my apologies to members of the internal Atkinson community about this not being advertised in a timely fashion. There was a misunderstanding between me and the marketing team. I thought they had pushed out messaging to the students and faculty and staff. They hadn't. That's my fault because I should have reminded them to. I did it myself the last 1 to 2 days. We'll get that right next time around, so it'll be properly messaged. So thank you again. Have a great rest of the day.